Hey guys, welcome back to Paranormal M. It's finally time to sit down together and talk about some creepy stories. It's been a long day, so let's just relax for a bit. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in their paranormal experiences. And if you've got more stories of your own, don't be shy. Send them my way. Before we jump into today's tales, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. So, hey, I'm Lila. And since it's October, I figured it's finally time to talk about the house I grew up in. I always feel like I have to start with, I'm not some amazing storyteller. I didn't write this all out as a novel or anything. I'm just going to talk to you the way I'd tell a friend at like 1 a.m. on the couch with the lights off. Most of this happened in the early 2000s, when I was a kid, in my mom's house. From as far back as I can remember, I was terrified of one specific part of that house. My mom's bedroom and the main bathroom next to it. The rest of the place felt fine, but that hallway, I would speed walk past it like it was a cliff edge. At first there wasn't really a reason, it was just this gut feeling, that heavy, watched feeling. Then my stepdad Mark got sick. He had lung cancer. He ended up on hospice in my mom's bedroom, and that's where he died when I was 9. After that, the house just changed. One of the first things that started happening was the back door. When Mark was alive, he had bad insomnia. He'd be up all night, pacing around, going outside to smoke or just get air. His routine was always the same. Door open, footsteps to the yard, a pause, footsteps back, door close, lock. After he died, that exact routine kept happening. I'd be in bed late at night and suddenly hear the back door open, footsteps across the tile, a pause, the back door again. It would close, then that tiny metallic click of the lock. I was 9, absolutely terrified, and there was no way I was getting up to check. I'd just lie there stiff as a board thinking, nope, no thank you, I'm good right here. When I told my mom about it, she'd just sigh and say, "You're hearing the neighbors," or "You're imagining things." But my older sister Jess heard it too. We'd look at each other down the hallway some nights like, "You heard that, right?" And we didn't even have to say it out loud. One night, not long after, I couldn't sleep and decided to crash in the living room. Now this was before smartphones. No scrolling, no Netflix on a tablet, just me, a couch, and the dark. I remember just lying there, kind of staring around, letting my mind wander, when I heard footsteps come up behind the couch. Not from the hallway, from directly behind me. Instant goosebumps. That buzzing feeling under your skin when you know you're not alone. I squeezed my eyes shut and pretended to be asleep, because in my kid brain, if I looked like I was sleeping, maybe whatever it was would, I don't know, go away. Then I heard my name. Lila. Lila. It was my mom's voice. Clear, soft, just above a whisper. She said my name maybe 3 times. I could feel someone behind me, like they were standing over me, staring down. I did not move. I just kept breathing slow and shallow, pretending to sleep until, eventually, I really did fall asleep. The next morning at breakfast, I asked my mom, "Hey, did you come into the living room last night and say my name?" She looked at me and said, "No, honey, I was asleep." I told her it sounded exactly like her voice and that something was standing behind the couch. She brushed it off, told me I was being paranoid, making things up. After that, I pretty much swore I would never spend another night in that living room if I could help it. My mom is still like that, by the way. Denies everything. To this day, she won't admit that house is even a little bit haunted. She'll just laugh and say we watched too many horror movies. But my sister? Jess had her own stories. One time she was furious and came into the kitchen where my mom and I were. She was like, "Okay, whoever keeps opening my bedroom door in the middle of the night, stop. It's freaking me out." She said sometimes she could feel something tugging at her while she slept, like something was grabbing her feet or pulling at her blanket, enough to wake her up. That's when we really started comparing notes for the first time. I told her that in my room I felt okay, like it was my little safe bubble. But the moment I stepped out, I felt watched. Constantly. I would literally sprint back to my bedroom if I had to use the bathroom at night. She told me about this one night when my mom was remodeling the house. I was sleeping over at a friend's, so Jess had to sleep alone in the living room. She said she woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of banging all around the kitchen, like cupboards or drawers slamming. It went on for a bit, then just stopped. When she finally fell asleep again, she had this horrible nightmare. She said in the dream she was being chased around the house by 3 old women, just circling the same rooms over and over, these old women getting closer and closer. Same house, same layout. She woke up terrified. When I was around 11, I had my friend Bree over. My mom wasn't home, and my grandpa, well, we all called him Papa Joe, was supposed to pick us up later so we could stay the night at his place. Bree and I were in my room with the door closed. I was packing an overnight bag, just throwing clothes in, talking about nothing, when we heard it. From the kitchen, this loud stomping. Heavy, fast footsteps. They ran from the kitchen straight down the hallway to my bedroom door, and then stopped. Right outside. Bree and I just stared at each other, eyes huge. I remember whispering, "Nope, nope, we're not doing this." I opened my bedroom window, and the 2 of us climbed out like we were escaping a movie. I called my grandpa from the front yard and asked if he could pick us up earlier. We sat on the porch until his car turned into the driveway, and neither of us went back inside until he was there. Another time when I was about 12, my cousin Tasha came over in the afternoon. It was still light out, around 5. My mom wasn't home again. This is a theme, by the way. And Tasha asked if she could take a shower. I told her, "Yeah, sure, but the extra towels are in my mom's room. You'll have to go in there." Now, I was not going in that bedroom. I would avoid that room at all costs, even during the day. But Tasha didn't really believe in anything spooky, and it was daylight, so I figured she'd be fine. She went down the hallway, turned into my mom's room, and I went back to messing around in my bedroom. Then I heard her scream, like blood-curdling, panicked screaming, followed by the sound of her running. I rushed into the living room just in time to see her bolt out of my mom's room and straight toward the front door. I didn't even ask questions. I just unlocked the door, and we both ran out onto the front porch. She was breathing hard, pointing back at the house, trying to explain what happened. When she finally calmed down, she told me she'd gone into my mom's bathroom, flipped on the light, and in the corner of the room, she saw a tall shadow figure just standing there. Not moving, just there. She said as soon as she realized she was looking at a person-shaped shadow that shouldn't be there, she turned and ran. I told her, "Yeah, no, we are not staying here tonight." We called Papa Joe again, and he took us to his place. Honestly, that became my little survival strategy. If I heard anything too weird while I was alone, I'd just wait out on the porch until someone came home. By the time I was 14, my sister Jess had moved out, but her old room was still there, door usually wide open, dark at night. It got to the point where these things were almost routine. Not normal, but familiar. If it had been every single night, maybe it would have become just an annoyance, but I never completely got used to it. Every time it happened, that same fear would hit. There was this one stretch when my mom went on a trip to visit the guy who eventually became my second stepdad. While she was gone, Jess came back to stay a few nights and drive me to school. The first night she was there, we were in the kitchen loading a bowl into her new little glass bubbler. We were being very responsible teenagers, of course. As we're standing there, we suddenly hear banging coming from her old bedroom. Not a single thump, more like loud knocks against the wall. We looked at each other. She kind of half smiled and said, "Okay, That's probably just Mark mad I'm letting you smoke in his house." We both laughed, shrugged it off, and nothing else happened that night. A little later that year, I had 2 friends stay over, Bree again, and a newer friend named Rowan. The day was totally normal. We watched movies, ate junk food, the usual. When it got late, I decided I'd be brave and let them take my bedroom while I slept on the couch. Part of me felt like I was being protective, like, if anything weird's gonna happen, better it happens to me than to them. It was around 4 in the morning. I was lying on the couch with my phone, just mindlessly scrolling, when I heard the back door. Open, close. At that point, I was used to that sound. That was Mark's routine, and usually, nothing else came with it. So I ignored it. Then I heard the crinkle and release of a trash bag. It sounded like someone was messing with the garbage in the back room, lifting the bag and letting it drop. Again, I tried to ignore it. I was tired and honestly kind of annoyed. Then the footsteps started. Slow, deliberate steps coming toward the living room. I turned over to face the back of the couch, toward my bedroom door, and shut my eyes. My heart was pounding, but I was stubborn. I was like, I'm not giving this thing the satisfaction of watching me freak out. The footsteps came closer and closer until they stopped right behind the couch. I could feel that same staring sensation again, like we were in some kind of standoff. It probably lasted 10, maybe 15 seconds, but it felt like forever. Then my bedroom door opened. I still didn't move. I just kept my eyes closed. Then I felt someone nudging my shoulder. "Lila, hey, wake up." I opened my eyes and it was Bree. I was honestly shocked it was her and not something else. She climbed onto the couch with me and said, "Something's grabbing my blanket and my feet. It keeps pulling at them. I'm freaked out." I told her as calmly as I could, "Yeah, weird stuff happens sometimes. Let's just hang out here. It's usually better when there's more than one person." She said Rowan was still asleep and hadn't noticed anything. I told Bree what had just happened to me with the footsteps and the trash bag, and she got even more freaked out. So we put on adventure time and tried to joke a little until the sun came up. The next morning, we asked Rowan if anything happened to her. She said no. Honestly, I got the vibe she thought we were just trying to scare her because she was new. Around that time, my mom let her new partner move in, my second stepdad. Let's call him Eric. He'd been living with us maybe a week when he and I went out to run errands together. We were just driving, listening to the radio, when he glanced over at me and said, "Hey, do you think your house is haunted?" I just about jumped out of the seat. "Oh my God, yes! Did you see something? What happened?" I was so relieved that an adult might actually believe me. I got chills instantly. I told him, "And that is exactly why I avoid that bedroom. I won't go in there alone. There has always been something in there." He told me he'd mentioned it to my mom and she'd told him he was paranoid, that nothing like that ever happens. Classic. He and I swapped stories the whole ride. Later, after he'd been there a while, he admitted that whenever he walked past Jess's old room, he'd see a shape in the corner of his eye, like a person standing right inside the doorway. Fast forward a bit. I'm older now, but weird things still happen in that house. I refuse, like flat out refuse, to be in there alone. Even when I go over to help my mom clean, I'll do the kitchen, the living room, whatever. But when it's time to clean her bedroom and bathroom, she has to be in there with me. She'll laugh, roll her eyes, say I'm dramatic, but she stays. She sits on the bed scrolling her phone or folding laundry while I do the dusting and vacuuming, and I feel slightly less like I'm going to turn around and see a shadow in the corner. Eric still occasionally tells me about weird stuff that happens when they're there alone. Jess and I still talk about growing up in that creepy house, swapping which memories still make our skin crawl. I know some people don't believe in this stuff, and that's okay. I'm not here to convince anyone. It just felt right to finally say it all out loud, especially in October. So yeah, that was my childhood house, the one I still won't stay in by myself. Happy October! So, this is going to sound made up, especially because it happened on Halloween night of all nights. But I promise you, I'm telling it exactly how I remember it. My name's Emma, and my partner, let's call him Alex, and I live together in this lower ground floor flat in one of those classic British Victorian terraced houses. You know the type. High ceilings, slightly crooked floors, and more creaks than a box of old floorboards. Now, I'll be honest, I'm very suggestible. I do believe in ghosts and the paranormal. I love spooky stories. I watch all the haunted house documentaries, probably not helping myself there. Alex, on the other hand, does not believe in any of that. He's the super rational one. Over time, being with him, I kind of trained myself to brush weird things off. Every odd noise, every strange feeling, I just tell myself, it's the pipes, it's the neighbors, it's the wind, calm down. And honestly, nothing truly weird had ever happened in this flat. Just the usual old building stuff. Creaks in the night, radiators making dramatic noises, that sort of thing. So, Halloween night, we stayed up later than we should have. Alex was at his PC with his headphones on, playing some game, and I was curled up on the sofa with a book. We finally went to bed at about 1:30 a.m. because we were both working from home the next day and thought, it's fine, we can sleep in a little. For the past couple of weeks, I've been taking these herbal sleep tablets called Dream Ease to help me get a better night's sleep. They're over the counter, nothing wild, but they do give me some odd, vivid dreams sometimes. Since I struggle to fall asleep and stay asleep, I figured they were worth a try. Not long after I nodded off that night, I got this really strange feeling, like someone was standing over me. You know when you're asleep but you suddenly become aware of the room? That kind of thing. I thought maybe Alex had woken up to go to the loo or get a drink of water or something. So I opened my eyes. At the end of the bed, there was this human-shaped figure, completely dark, like a silhouette cut out of pitch black. It looked tall, taller than Alex, just standing there at the foot of the bed. At first, my brain did the logical thing. Oh, that's just Alex. Maybe he's looking for his phone or something. But as I tried to really focus on it, I realized I couldn't. It was like trying to bring something into focus when you don't have your glasses on. It was there, but not quite solid. And then this horrible, creeping feeling washed over me. Just wrong. Like the air had gone cold inside my chest. I got so spooked that I squeezed my eyes shut, took a breath, and then forced myself to look again. When I opened my eyes the second time, the big figure wasn't there anymore, but I saw these smaller, shifting shadows in the same area, almost like they were breaking apart and fading away. Little patches of darkness sort of dissolving into the rest of the room. At that point, I told myself, okay, Emma, it's the dreamies. It's just a weird, half-awake dream. You're imagining it. I rolled over, pulled the duvet up, and somehow managed to fall back asleep. A bit later, I don't know how long, maybe an hour, I woke up again with that exact same feeling. Someone was in the room. I didn't hear anything, I just felt it. You know when your skin knows before your brain does? That. But this time, I refused to open my eyes. I was scared, and I also didn't want to feed into it. I literally thought, if I don't look, it'll just go away. It's all in my head. So I stayed perfectly still, eyes closed, heart pounding, and eventually drifted off again. So we're in the kitchen making coffee. The kettle's boiling, the usual slow start to a work-from-home day. And Alex goes, totally casually, I had such a weird night's sleep. I was exhausted and passed out straight away, but then I woke up suddenly because I felt like there was someone in the room, and I just froze. I stared at him and asked, what do you mean, someone in the room? He says, I don't know. It just felt like someone was there. like a presence. I actually sat up and looked around, looked at the door, but there was nothing, so I just went back to sleep. And I swear to you, my whole body went cold. I got full-on chills, because that was exactly how I had felt. So I told him what happened to me. The dark figure at the end of the bed, the smaller shadows, the feeling of someone in the room, and how I'd woken up twice. I also asked him, "Do you remember roughly what time that was?" And he goes, "Not long after we went to bed, maybe a little after 2?" Which is exactly when it happened to me. At that point, I just looked at him like, "Okay, Mr. Skeptic, explain that." Even he didn't have a neat, logical answer. He tried to. He said maybe we were both half awake and influenced by all the spooky Halloween stuff, or maybe some shared sleep disturbance. But you could see on his face that it unsettled him. To try and comfort me, he said, "Maybe it was just one of our grandparents checking in on us, making sure we're all right." And I appreciated that. I really did. It was sweet. But the feeling I had that night wasn't comforting. It wasn't warm or protective. It felt heavy and uneasy and dark. Not evil necessarily, just wrong. So now we're both a bit freaked out. I'm sitting there like, are we losing it? Is this some kind of sleep paralysis thing? Was it our brains syncing up in a weird way? Or was it something else? I still don't really know. All I know is that 2 people in the same room on the same night both woke up with the feeling that someone was there who shouldn't have been, and one of us actually saw something. And yes, before you ask, I absolutely went out later that day and bought sage. Whether it's for the vibes, the ritual, or just to make myself feel like I'm doing something, I don't know. But that night, I opened all the windows, lit the sage, and gently but very firmly told anything that wasn't paying rent to kindly get out of our flat. If nothing else, it made me feel a little less powerless. And that's the story of our Halloween night, when the shadows came to visit. So, let me tell you a story. I was born in the Philippines, up in Luzon, the northern part of the islands. My mom was from Laguna, from this small town called Calauan, the one famous for pineapples. My dad's side was from Pangasinan, where there's more salt than you'd think a person could ever need. Salt beds, sea breeze, the works. Now, my family? Very Catholic. Rosaries on rearview mirrors, calendars with saints, the whole package. But even with all the statues and novenas, there was always this quiet understanding that there's more going on than what we see. Old beliefs don't really die, they just learn to whisper. One of my earliest memories, I must have been about 4, is of visiting my mother's village. It was a rushed trip. Usually we'd leave Metro Manila early in the morning and get to Calauan by lunchtime. But that time, everything was scrambled. We left late, got stuck in traffic, and by the time we reached my Lola Nena's house, it was already dark. I remember the air felt heavy, like it knew something I didn't. We barely stayed at the house. We hurried straight to the barangay hall, the community center, because there was something going on. When we got there, the place was full. Not just relatives, but half the town, it felt like. People were quiet, tense. The grown-ups moved like they were carrying invisible weights. Sadness, anger, fear. I was too young to understand any of it. And in a crowd like that, a little kid just becomes background noise. My mom was busy with whatever urgent thing had brought us there. My dad was talking to relatives. Everyone had something to do except me. I was standing near the edge of the crowd when I saw my youngest uncle. Let's call him Tito Ruel. He was barely older than a teenager in my memory, still with that mix of boyish grin and awkward grown-up clothes. He was the only one who really looked at me, "You're bored, no?" he said, smiling. And before I could even answer, he squatted down and offered me his back. "Come on, let's go for a walk." The next thing I remember is sitting on his shoulders, my small hands buried in his thick hair, my cheek resting against the top of his head sometimes. He walked us through the quiet streets of Kalauan, playing tour guide like he'd practiced the role. "That's the church," he said, lifting my hand to point. "That's where we used to skip catechism and play outside." We passed the town's pineapple statue, the one that looked both proud and slightly ridiculous in the middle of the plaza. We went down those tree-lined streets where houses sat shoulder to shoulder, like old neighbors gossiping. On either side of the road, there were these stone-lined canals, open gutters really, where water trickled along. I remember leaning over from his shoulders, fascinated, seeing these tiny frogs and snails in the water. "When I was your age," he told me, "there used to be little fish in there. We'd try to catch them for fun. Now, just these guys." I don't actually remember the walking part very clearly. What I remember is the feeling of being carried. His hands on my ankles so I wouldn't fall. The way he'd reach up, take my hand, and point at things like a tour guide who was proud of his little town. Eventually, we went back to the community center. The lights were harsh. The air was stuffy with incense and sweat and whispers. Tito Ruel lifted me off his shoulders and set me down near the doorway. He said something like, "Okay, go to your mom now." And just like that, he melted back into the crowd. "Where did you go?" she demanded. She was not the eldest sibling, but she was the one everyone listened to, and someone was supposed to have been watching me. I told her, very matter-of-factly, I was with Tito Ruel. He showed me the town. I don't remember their exact faces, but I do remember the mood shift, confusion, then this sort of tightness. They thought I was making up stories, trying to avoid getting scolded for wandering off. Anyway, it was late. They finally brought me inside. I remember the central room, packed with relatives and neighbors. At the front, surrounded by flowers and candles, was a wooden box. I didn't know the word for it then. Later, I'd learn it was called a coffin. I walked closer, curious, and there he was. My Uncle Ruel. Lying very still, hands folded, dressed neatly like he was going to church. His face looked calm, like he was just sleeping. I tugged at someone's hand, I think it was my aunt's, and asked, "Why is Tito Ruel sleeping there? I was just with him." That was the night someone first explained death to me. They told me he was gone, that what I'd seen in the coffin was his body, but that he himself, his soul, his spirit, however they phrased it, was already with God. But all I could think was, he had just walked me around town. He had just carried me on his shoulders. He had just pointed out the church and the pineapple and the frogs in the gutter. Looking back, maybe my little brain just wanted him so badly to still be there that it stitched together something comforting. Or maybe, and I'm just telling you how it felt, maybe he saw me standing alone and decided to give me one last tour. The next day we had the funeral. There was a church service, then a slow walk to the cemetery. It was my first time in a graveyard. The path we took between the tombs felt familiar. I recognized some turns, some corners, like I'd already walked them the night before, on his shoulders. I remember my family crying at the grave, and me just standing there, not fully grasping what never again meant. I didn't understand that from that moment on, no matter how many new babies were born or who married into the family, in my mind, it would always feel like we were becoming fewer. That was my mother's side. My father's side was different. He came from land. Not so much piles of cash, but hectares of it, fields and orchards. Land is its own kind of power. I was more afraid of my dad than close to him when I was a kid. My mom was home, softness, warmth. My father was thunder. But one time, they took me to visit his parents, way out where his family name came from. And like always, I wandered off. I didn't know anyone there. Looking back, most of our trips were probably to my mom's side of the family, or I was just too young to remember his. There are old photo albums of me even tinier than in this story, smiling on beaches in Mindanao, and I have zero memory of the plane rides or any of it. Anyway, my grandparents' place on my dad's side sat near this big expanse of green, different kind of trees than in Laguna. They were laid out in these odd, almost geometric rows, but behind them rose a thicker, wilder wall of forest. I would learn later that the neat rows were our family's orchard. Back then, I just saw trees and thought, adventure. So I slipped away. You'd think I'd be scared, but I wasn't. No matter how dark it got between the trunks, I could always see slices of the sky above. The pale shape of the sun filtered through the leaves. It felt like the jungle itself was, I don't know, watching out for me, not stalking me. Eventually, the trees began to thin out. The ground got sandier under my feet. The smell changed, less earth, more salt. Then suddenly, I was on a beach. White sand, not the grayish kind you get near a busy port, but the soft, almost powdery kind that squeaks under your toes. The sea in front of me was a greenish blue, and the sky above it was this endless dome of light. The only man-made thing there, aside from me, was a wooden cross. Not polished or fancy like the ones in church, just two rough beams tied together, planted near the edge of the sand. I didn't go near it. Even as a kid, I knew better than to mess with crosses in the middle of nowhere. I was already somewhere I probably wasn't supposed to be. I didn't know how to swim yet, so I stayed close to shore. I let the waves chase my feet, running back and forth, going only knee-deep when I felt particularly brave. I don't know how long I played like that, but kids have a special talent for losing time when they're happy. Then the sun started to dip, the light turning more golden and slanting across the water. And that's when it hit me. I did it again, I thought. I'd wandered off. They were going to be furious. I turned back toward the line of trees and realized I had absolutely no idea which path I'd taken. For a moment, my fear of getting lost wrestled with my fear of getting yelled at. But eventually the fear of my dad's anger won. So I took a deep breath and walked back into the trees anyway. The forest I went into did not feel like the same forest I came out of. Before, everything had been curiosity and wonder. Now every crack of a twig made me jump. Every patch of shadow looked too dark. I couldn't see my own footprints. I had no idea where home was from here. But whenever I froze, not sure whether to go left or right, I would get this pull. Not a voice, not a light, just a feeling that something, someone, further in was saying, this way. So I'd look up. The sun was still up there somewhere, a pale promise through the leaves. I'd look down, and somehow, there was always a thin gap in the plants that could be a path if I decided to believe it was. So I followed those little invitations. Walk a bit. Stop. Feel that tug again. Adjust. Walk some more. Eventually, the wildness softened. Order returned. I stepped out between two rows of trees and realized I was back in the orchard, just a few lines away from where I'd started my adventure. I ran back to my grandparents' house, heart pounding, legs tired, sand still clinging to my ankles. The adults were frantic. Some relatives had already gone out looking for me. My grandmother grabbed me and checked me over, like I might have grown a second head while I was away. I, being a very straightforward little kid, blurted out, "I didn't know we were so rich we had our own beach." They just stared at me. The next day, we piled into vehicles and drove around town. They wanted to show me where the family name came from. I pressed my face to the window, looking for that quiet beach. There wasn't one. We drove further north and finally hit the real coastline. There were boats, people, houses, noise. It wasn't empty at all, but the curve of the land, the way the shore bent left and right, felt eerily similar to the beach where I'd been playing the day before. Growing up, I heard classmates and relatives talk about spirits and unseen things like they were always evil. Demons, tricksters, things to be afraid of. And I get it. A lot of people have stories where those things don't feel kind. But for me, as strange as it sounds, I never felt hunted. I felt watched over. If not loved, then at least guided. Years later, I moved to America. The landscapes changed. Pine forests instead of jungles, mountains and lakes instead of rice fields and mango trees. Every now and then, out on a hike or sitting alone in some quiet park, I'd feel a familiar presence in the rustle of leaves or the way sunlight found me through branches. It was gentler there, quieter, or maybe I had already learned to doubt myself by then. The older I got, the more I tried to explain things away, to file them under memory glitches, childhood imagination, coincidence. It felt safer to trust logic than to admit that maybe, just maybe, something had reached out to me in those in-between spaces. But when I really sit with those memories, my uncle's shoulders under my hands, the hidden beach at the end of the orchard, the invisible guidance in the trees, I don't think about horror stories. I think about how, in the moments when I was small and lost and alone, I never truly felt abandoned. Whatever it was, memory, spirit, imagination, grace, I felt accompanied. And that feeling has stayed with me, even when I pretend it hasn't. Okay, so, let me just tell this to you like I would if we were sitting on the couch together. My brother, I'll call him Leo, was 17 when he passed away really suddenly. It was one of those moments where your whole life gets ripped in half in a single day. And Leo, man, he was obsessed with this one video game. It was his comfort place, his happy place, his stay up way too late and yell at the TV place. You know the type. After he died, me and my sister, Nora, started playing that same game a lot more. At first, it was just to feel close to him, like we were stepping into his little world for a bit. Over time, it just became our thing. We'd hop on at night, run some matches, talk about him, laugh about his old rage quits. It was kind of our way of keeping him in the room. So, last night, we were playing duos, that's teams of two, and we'd only been in the match for maybe 2 minutes. We dropped way out on the edge of the map, deliberately away from everyone else. It was super quiet. No footsteps, no shots, nothing. Just us. And then we start hearing this sound. It was like this relentless buzzing and slashing, kind of like someone revving a chainsaw and swinging it over and over. At first, I thought maybe it was some new item or a glitch, but it just would not stop. Over and over and over, this loud slash. It was so out of place because there was supposedly no one anywhere near us. So naturally, we're laughing and confused, like, "Do you hear that?" "Yeah, where the hell is that coming from?" We start searching. We check behind rocks, around buildings, inside rooms, out in the field. Nothing. No footsteps on the visual radar, no shots, no enemies. Just this looping chainsaw swing sound that seemed to be right on top of us and nowhere at the same time. Later, when we watched the replay, we figured out there was someone. They were literally standing on the roof above us, on the very top edge, just hacking at the air with this saw-type tool. Perfectly still, just swinging, not moving, not looting, not doing anything that made sense. But in the moment, we had no idea. All we knew was creepy noise, nowhere to be found. This went on for, I swear, close to 10 minutes. 10 minutes in an online match is a long time to just stand there and swing a tool. Most people would get bored or third-partied by then. Finally, out of nowhere, this boy character jumps down off the roof and lands right next to Nora. Doesn't attack, doesn't build, doesn't shoot. Just stands there, facing her, like he'd been trying to get our attention the entire time. And of course, her reflexes kick in. She freaks out and blasts him because, we're in a match. This is what you do. As soon as she does, we both just kind of go quiet. And then we start joking, trying to shake it off. Watch that be Leo, trolling us from the afterlife. Yeah, that would be exactly his sense of humor. Because here's the thing. Ever since he died, weird stuff has been happening around us. Lights turning on by themselves, especially in his old room. Random things getting knocked over with no one nearby. Cereal boxes, stuff off shelves, little things that make you stop and go, okay, that's odd. We've always half joked, half believed it was him messing with us. Like he never really stopped being the little brother who loved to startle us for fun. I went to check the player's profile. And that's when my stomach dropped. The username included my brother's first name. Not something super common either. Not like John or Mike. It was his name. Clear as day. I just stared at it for a second, and then I told Nora. We both looked at each other like, no way. We kept repeating, "You've got to be kidding me." Now, here's the thing. It wasn't his old username. The one we knew from when he was alive was different. So logically, okay, maybe some random kid out there just happens to have the same name in their tag. But then it got weirder. A little later, me and Nora were scrolling through the recently played with list, just messing around, still talking about how bizarre the whole thing was. And there it was. His real username. The exact one he used when he was alive. On our recently played with list. According to the game, we had played with him a couple of days ago. I just froze. It's like my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I kept refreshing, backing out, going back in, but it was there, clear as day. His exact name, recent match. I cannot even explain the feeling that washed over me. It was like being yanked back to the day we lost him. All the shock, the confusion, the "this can't be happening" feeling. Later that night, I was on Messenger with my friend, I'll call her Tara, telling her the whole story. The chainsaw sound, the lonely player, the name, the recent matches. I was typing it all out, and while I was doing that, I had this cold, tingly feeling at the back of my scalp. Goosebumps everywhere. The air around me felt heavy and cold at the same time. Tara messages back and says something like, "I really think that was Leo saying hi. That sounds exactly like him." And the second she sends that, her entire phone screen suddenly turns black and white. Not just dimmed or glitched, full grayscale. She thought it was weird enough that she grabbed her kid's phone and took a picture of it, then sent that to me as proof. After she restarted the phone, the color went back to normal. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting there with that frozen feeling, wrapped up in this cold, electric kind of air. You know that feeling when you know you're not alone in the room, even if you can't see anyone? Like the air itself is watching you. That's what it felt like. And this isn't the first time I've felt him around. Right after he died, they gave me a box with some of his things from the scene. I had the box in one of the rooms at home. That night, I started hearing noises in there. Soft shuffling, like someone moving around, things lightly brushing or being nudged. At first, I told myself it was the house settling, or the heater, or something stupid and normal. But the sound kept going. Then the dread kicked in. Not just fear, dread. Like this heavy, panicky feeling that wasn't even mine. It was almost like I could hear his thoughts in my own head. Stuff like, "Oh my God, what happened? This can't be real. This can't be happening to me." It felt like I was suddenly sharing his shock and terror from the moment everything went wrong. It was so intense that I could not stay in the house. I grabbed my keys and left and stayed somewhere else that night because I just couldn't handle being there with that box and those feelings. Look, I'm not saying I have the answers. I know there are rational explanations. Accounts can be hacked, usernames can glitch, data can get weird. I even contacted the game company before, asking about how usernames work. They told me usernames can't just be reassigned, deleted, or reused after inactivity. They're basically locked once they're taken. So yeah, technically, maybe someone got into his account somehow. But think about it. This is one of the biggest games on the planet, with thousands and thousands of people online constantly. The odds that, out of all the people playing at that exact moment, we'd end up matched with an account that has his exact old username, and another one with his actual name in it, while joking about him, while hearing that weird sound, while being totally isolated on the map. I don't know. It feels like too much to chalk up to coincidence. So I keep circling back to the same question in my head. Was that our brother, just dropping into our match to say, "Hey, I'm still here. I'm still playing with you"? I don't know for sure. But I'll tell you this. The way the air felt, the timing of everything, the names, the phone glitch, the recently played with list, it all felt like him. And honestly, even if I never get a logical explanation, a part of me hopes it was Leo. Because the idea of him logging on one more time just to mess with us, just to make us laugh and freak out and feel him close again, that actually brings me a weird kind of peace. So, my dad died pretty suddenly. It was October of last year. He was 62 and I was 29. One day he was just there, making dumb jokes and asking if I'd eaten yet, and then, heart attack. He was gone. I still trip over that sentence when I say it out loud. For some context, my dad, his name was Ray, and I were both very 420 friendly. That was kind of our little thing. Please don't judge us too harshly for it. We weren't trying to escape life. Honestly, some of my favorite memories are us splitting an edible, putting on some ridiculous comedy, and just laughing until we cried. It felt like this safe little world where it was just me and him. My mom, Carla, struggled with alcoholism when I was a kid. So a lot of the time, it was just my dad and me against the world. I was his kid, his shadow. He made my lunches, showed up to every school thing, tried way too hard to understand TikTok just so we had something new to talk about. We were close. Since he passed, I've begged for some kind of sign from him. Nights where I just lay there in the dark, whispering, "Please, Dad, something, anything. Just let me know you're still around." But for a whole year, nothing. No dreams, no weird coincidences, just silence and grief. Then last night happened. So I made a dumb mistake. I tried a new THC gummy I'd never had before. I thought I was being careful. I only took one, but it was way stronger than I expected. Like way too strong. Within an hour, I started greening out. My heart was racing. My skin felt like it was buzzing, and I honestly thought I was going to die. I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, absolutely miserable. My thoughts were looping like, "Please let this pass. Please let me come down. I don't want to feel like this. Just make it stop." I wasn't talking out loud at first. It was all in my head. And right as I'm silently begging for it to end, the overhead fan in my bedroom turns on. Now, this fan is annoying, actually. It doesn't have pull cords. There's no wall switch for it. The only way to turn it on is with this little remote that looks like a cheap TV remote. You have to press an actual button. The remote was not in my room. Like, I knew exactly where it was, on the kitchen counter under yesterday's mail. No one else was home. The fan just clicked on all by itself and started spinning. At first I thought, okay, I'm really too high. This is it. I'm hallucinating. But then, instantly, there was this presence in the room. That's the only way I can describe it. It felt like the air got thicker, but not in a scary way. Just full, warm, heavy with meaning. And I knew it was my dad. I just started sobbing. Not cute crying, ugly, shaking, can't catch my breath crying. And I actually said out loud into the empty room, "Dad, is that you? Are you here with me? Are you okay, wherever you are? Am I going to see you again?" My voice sounded so small. I felt like a little kid again, scared in the dark, reaching out for him. Right then, this wave of warmth rolled over me. My heart started pounding, harder than it ever has in my life. It wasn't like a panic attack, though. I've had those. Panic feels cold and sharp. This felt huge, like my chest couldn't contain it. There was no voice, no words, just this overwhelming feeling that every question I just asked, the answer was yes. Yes, it was him. Yes, he was there with me. Yes, I would see him again. And here's the weird part. As soon as that intensity hit its peak, the fan spinning above me, my heart racing, tears everywhere, my high started to back off, like someone turned a dimmer switch down. Within a few minutes, I went from, "I'm going to die, I'm never coming back from this," to this strange, clear calm. My thoughts stopped racing. The nausea eased up. I was still high, but I wasn't terrified anymore. I could breathe again. All I could think was, he heard me. He showed up. He helped me come down. I have his ashes in that room, by the way. They're in this dark blue urn on top of a little shelf, along with some of his favorite things. His old watch, the hat he wore every time he grilled, a faded concert ticket he swore was from the best night of his life. I was lying just a few feet away from all of that. So I'm there, on the bed, fan spinning, tears all over my face, hands shaking. I stayed like that for another 15 minutes at least, just whispering thank you over and over. I felt wrung out, but also held, like I wasn't alone. Now look, I completely understand that some people are going to say, it was just the weed. Your brain was freaking out and created a comforting story. And maybe that's true. Maybe it was all chemicals and anxiety and coincidence. But here's my truth. It didn't feel like that. Not even a little. I've been too high before. I know what paranoia and hallucinations feel like. This was different. This was focused, comforting. It felt like my dad knew I was scared and did the one thing he could think of to make me feel better. Turned on the fan, cooled me down, and sat with me until it passed. And it wasn't just that night that's made me feel like he's still hanging around. My mom, Carla, has 2 cats, Luna and Pepper. These cats are like the definition of, you may look at me from afar. They're not cuddly. They barely tolerated us, honestly. If they let you pet them twice in a row, it was a miracle. But around the 1-year mark of my dad's death, they started acting strange. Almost right after the anniversary, they suddenly turned into little shadows. They follow my mom everywhere, curl up on her chest when she lies down, sit next to her on the couch, pressed right up against her like little furry heating pads. This is not normal behavior for them, at all. My mom keeps saying, half joking, Ray must have told them to keep an eye on me. And every time Luna curls up on my lap too, something she never used to do, I get that same little feeling in my chest. Like he's nudging them toward us, like, go on, they need you. Take care of my girls for me. Maybe it's just grief making patterns out of nothing. Maybe the cats are just getting older and softer. Maybe the fan glitched. Maybe the remote got bumped somehow. But I know how that moment felt. I know how suddenly the fear drained out of me. I know how I went from spiraling to safe, just like when I was a kid and my dad would sit on the edge of my bed, rub my back, and tell me everything was going to be okay. Before last night, I wasn't sure what I believed about the afterlife. I kind of floated in that space of, I don't know, I hope there's something. Now, I still don't have answers, like big picture answers. I don't know what exactly happens when we die, but I do believe this. Whatever's waiting for us, whatever it looks like, wherever it is, my dad is there. He's okay. And somehow, in some way I don't have the language for, he's still able to look out for me now and then. I believe I'll see him again. That belief feels less like a wish and more like a quiet, steady knowing. My dad, still being my dad, still taking care of me. Still finding a way to say, hey kiddo, I've got you. Breathe. You're going to be okay. You know, I'm still not totally sure how to explain this, but I'm pretty sure I met an angel once. So last September, I moved to Maui completely on my own. No grand plan, no safety net. I'd been living in Chicago, working this corporate marketing job that looked good on paper, but made me feel empty. I remember sitting at my desk one day, staring at spreadsheets and thinking, if I don't leave now, I'm going to wake up 10 years from now and still feel this stuck. So I did it. I sold most of my stuff, packed what was left into 2 suitcases, and moved to Hawaii. I only knew one person on the island, an old coworker who had moved out there a year before. That was it. The transition was rough. There were days I'd wake up in this ridiculously beautiful place and still feel so lonely and scared. I'd walk along the water at sunrise and wonder, what am I even doing here? What am I looking for? I questioned everything, my choices, my future, whether I'd just made a huge mistake. One afternoon, I went to this local park to play pickleball. It became my little escape, a way to meet people and not spiral in my own thoughts. I remember the sun was starting to dip a bit, the sky that soft gold, and the courts were buzzing with casual games and laughter. While I was waiting for my turn, this man walked up to me. He was a black man, tall, maybe late 30s, with the lightest gray-blue eyes I've ever seen. They were almost silver. He had this gentle energy about him, calm, kind, but very present, if that makes sense. Like he was really there with you when he looked at you. He smiled and said hi, and we started chatting the way you do with strangers at a park. Where are you from? How long have you been here? That kind of thing. And then everything got weird. Out of nowhere, he looks at me and goes, "You're from the Chicago area, right? Near Logan Square, on the corner of Kedzie and Armitage?" I just froze, because that was exactly where my old apartment was. Not kinda near, not in that general neighborhood, the exact intersection. I must have gone quiet because he just sort of smiled, like he knew he'd surprised me. Then he goes, "You've got 3 brothers." I laughed and said, "No, I only have 1 brother." He tilted his head, still calm, and said, "No, you have 3. 1 by blood, 2 by marriage." And that's when it hit me. I do have 1 biological brother and 2 stepbrothers, but I never think of the stepbrothers right away because I hardly ever see them. It honestly didn't even cross my mind until he said it again. I remember this little chill going down my spine. I hadn't told him anything about my family. Nothing. Then he looks at me and says, "You're Polish, right? Very close with your mom." And that part? That made my chest tighten a bit. Because I am Polish, and my mom is like my best friend. We talk almost every day. I hadn't mentioned that either. Every detail he said was just true. There was no vague guessing, no fishing like psychics sometimes do. It was specific, precise, too precise. For a second, my brain went to the weirdest places. I thought, is this guy a stalker? Did he somehow look me up on social media? But I couldn't make any of it make sense. There was nothing about our short conversation that could have given him that much information. He must have seen the confusion on my face because he kind of chuckled softly and said, "Don't worry, I'm not following you. I just get these things. I have a sense about certain people. You were meant to talk to me today." And the wildest thing was, I believed him. At that point, I hadn't told him that I'd quit my job, or that I was quietly panicking about money, about my future, about whether I'd completely sabotaged my life. I was carrying all that around in my head, but I hadn't said a word. And then he keeps going. He says, "You're going to meet your person soon. You'll be married at 27. You'll have 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy." For context, I'm 24, and I'd been worrying about all of that. Love, marriage, whether I'd ever find a partner, whether I'd even want kids by the time I got there. These are the things I was staying up late at night thinking about, turning over and over in my mind. But hearing it from him, I don't know, it didn't feel creepy. It didn't feel like someone trying to mess with me. It felt calming, almost like someone had quietly opened a window in a stuffy room. I didn't feel afraid of him at all. Instead, I felt this deep sense of peace settle over me. Like, for the first time in months, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, standing next to this stranger on a random pickleball court in Maui. We talked a little longer. I asked him what his name was, and he said, "My name's Micah." When it was finally my turn to play, I thanked him and started to walk toward the court. As we wrapped up, he said something like, "I'm always around. You'll see me again." I remember those words so clearly. I'm always around. I walked maybe 10, 15 steps away, and then I got that feeling. You know, when you suddenly want to look back, just to make sure something actually happened. So I turned around to glance back at him. He was gone. Not blended into the crowd, not walked over to the parking lot, just gone. The courts were fully fenced in, the kind of chain link you can see straight through. There wasn't really anywhere to disappear to that quickly without me noticing. If he'd walked toward the gate, I would have seen him. If he'd cut across the grass, I would have seen him. But there was nothing, no sign of him at all. I kept playing at those courts. I went back a lot, actually, partly for the games and partly because a very real part of me hoped I'd see him again. I'd catch myself scanning the people as I walked in, looking for those silver blue eyes, that calm energy, that gentle smile. I never saw him again. To this day, it's one of the most surreal, unexplainable moments of my life. I still think about it all the time. Whenever I start doubting myself, or my path, or whether I'm doing life right, I remember standing on that court with Micah, feeling completely seen by a stranger who knew things he shouldn't have been able to know. And whether he was an actual angel or just a human being with a strange gift, I don't know. But I do know this. In that moment, it felt like the universe reached out, put a hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "You're okay. Keep going. You're exactly where you need to be." Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M channel. Did you miss me? I'm back at the mic and ready to hit you with some more paranormal stories. Before we get started, make sure you smash that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of the latest videos. and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. It's always so cool seeing you guys from all over. I really love this part every time. Thanks for always listening, and don't be afraid to share your own paranormal experiences with me too. So, this happened to me a few months ago, and honestly, I still get chills just thinking about it. I haven't really told many people, because it feels like the kind of thing you jinx by saying out loud, you know? But I'm going to tell you, just as it happened to me. It all started on the Thursday night. I was in my room, half lying on my bed, watching this podcast I love, Midnight Echoes, with that girl Lena who always talks about creepy stories and urban legends. I was relaxed, scrolling on my phone, when suddenly, everything around me went weird. The room got cold in this really unnatural way. Not like, oh, the AC's too strong, but like the warmth got sucked out of everything. My hands felt numb, the air got heavy, and my screen just froze. The podcast stopped by itself, the image glitched, and then the screen went completely black. But the audio kept going for a second. Just this distorted whispering from my speakers, like the voices were far away and underwater. Then that cut out too. I remember staring at the dark screen thinking, okay, that was odd. And this really uncomfortable feeling settled in my chest, like I wasn't alone in the room. I tried to shake it off, finished another random video, and then decided to go out to the plaza with my friends, just to clear my head. That night, when I finally went to bed, that feeling came back. My mattress felt stiff, like I was lying on a wooden board. My blanket suddenly felt rough, almost scratchy, and my pillows were hard, like rocks. It's such a small detail, but it made me feel really wrong in my own bed. It took me forever to fall asleep. Now, I'm a super heavy sleeper. I almost never wake up in the middle of the night. But that night, I did. I opened my eyes and realized something was off immediately. My whole room was in black and white, like one of those old movies. No color at all. I tried to move and realized I couldn't. I was completely paralyzed. I could move my eyes, and after forcing it, I could barely turn my head, but my body was stuck. Then I noticed it. On the metal beam across my ceiling, perched like some kind of grotesque bird, there was this black, shapeless figure. It reminded me of a gargoyle, but made of shadow, with these bright red eyes that glowed like embers. It wasn't moving, it was just looking at me. I told myself, okay, this is sleep paralysis. You've seen TikToks about this. It's not real. Just ignore it. But it felt real. The way it tilted its head, the weight of its stare, the cold in the room. Everything felt too real. It watched me for what felt like a long time, and then everything snapped. I jolted awake, this time really awake, and the colors were back. I could move again. I grabbed my phone. It was 3:03 a.m. The next day was normal, technically. I went about my usual routine, but I felt dull, like someone had turned down the brightness on me. I was distracted, slow, a bit numb. I didn't really tell anyone what happened. I just tried to pretend it was a bad dream. That night, though, things got worse. I have this little mixed breed dog named Coco who sleeps in my room. Usually he curls up and knocks out, no problem. But that night, he kept growling at the wall across from my bed. Not the window, not the door, just this one spot on the wall. He wouldn't take his eyes off it. His fur was standing on end, and he kept giving these low, warning growls, like he was staring at something I couldn't see. I tried to calm him down, eventually fell asleep. And again, I woke up in the middle of the night. At first, I saw nothing. Then, slowly, A shape appeared near the wall where my dog had been growling. It was a tall, dark silhouette, like a man made of shadow, with those same red eyes. Not glowing bright, just burning quietly. He didn't have clear facial features, just the outline of a man and those eyes. He lifted one hand toward me, not fast, not aggressive, just a slow, deliberate motion, like he was reaching out. And then I snapped awake. I grabbed my phone again. 3:03 a.m. Exactly. By the third day, I was exhausted. I felt drained, heavy, kind of depressed. I slept a lot during the day, and by night, I was already bracing myself for whatever was going to happen. That night, I woke up paralyzed again, but this time, my vision was normal. I saw my room in full color, my posters, my blanket, the little glow from the streetlight coming through the window. Everything looked like it always does. But the air was freezing, and it felt thick, like it was hard to breathe it in. I blinked once. When I opened my eyes again, he was there. This time, he wasn't just a shadow. He looked human. He was standing at the foot of my bed, a little to the side. He looked like he was in his mid-20s maybe, tall, around 6'3", dark brown hair, similar to mine. His skin was pale, almost too pale, and his eyes were bright red, but clearer now, like glowing glass instead of just light. He was dressed in black from head to toe, black shirt, black pants, and this long, elegant trench coat that made him look like he'd stepped out of some gothic movie. But weirdly, he didn't scare me the way you'd think. I felt like I knew him from somewhere. There was this strange familiarity, like seeing someone you haven't met but somehow recognize. He walked slowly around my bed, not getting too close, just circling until he stood beside me. Then he spoke. "Do you know me?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, cold, but not threatening, just empty. And here's the strange part. My mouth answered before my mind did. "Yes," I said. But it didn't feel like I chose to say it. My lips moved on their own. He gave a small nod. "Perfect," he replied. After that, we talked. Or, I think we did. I have this feeling we had a whole conversation, but I can't remember it. It's like my brain refuses to let me bring the details back. I only remember the end. He straightened up a little, like we'd just finished discussing something important, and said, "Well, that's what we'll leave it at. That's our pact." And again, my mouth moved on its own. "Yes," I answered. He took a step toward the door and added, "Until next time." When he reached the door, he stopped, turned around, and lifted his hand in a small wave. And for the first time, he smiled at me. Not a big smile, just a subtle, almost gentle one. Then he opened the door. The moment it clicked, I woke up. This time, I wasn't gasping or panicking. I was calm, weirdly calm. I looked at my phone. 3:03 a.m. again. After that, nothing big like that ever happened again. No more full-on visits in the middle of the night. No more black and white vision. But ever since then, I felt like I'm not alone. In dark places, especially in hallways or stairwells, I get this very specific sensation, like someone is standing just behind me, watching. You know when you know someone's eyes are on you, even if you can't see them? It's like that. And then there's the really strange part. People who hurt me, make fun of me, or treat me badly. Something always happens to them. Not immediately, not like some movie curse. But a little while later, they'll get sick, or have some accident, or suddenly go through a rough patch. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, but after a while, it stopped feeling like coincidence. It started feeling like someone was keeping score. Sometimes I joke about it and say I must have a guardian demon instead of a guardian angel. I laugh when I say it, but deep down, I'm not completely joking. I've only told this story once before, to a small group of close friends. We were sharing weird experiences, and I decided to finally tell them about my pact. That same night, something happened. I was walking home, and there was this cold breeze that hit the back of my neck. Not the usual night air kind of chill, but that same cold I felt in my room those nights. It made me stop in my tracks. I turned my head toward where the wind felt like it was coming from. Down the street, there was only one streetlight on. Everything else was dim, but that one lamp was casting a perfect circle of light on the pavement. And in the middle of that circle stood someone. Tall, dark coat, head slightly tilted. Even from far away, I recognized him. Not with my eyes, but with that same strange familiarity in my chest. It was him. Those red eyes, subtle but unmistakable, were fixed on me. He didn't move closer. He just stood there under the light, watching. Then he lifted his hand and waved, just like he did that night in my room. I froze. I don't even think I breathed. He gave me a small, almost playful smile. I blinked, just once, and when my eyes opened again, the circle of light was empty. The street light was still on, but he was gone. And now, while I'm telling you all this, I'm getting that same feeling again. The air around me is colder than it should be. I checked the temperature earlier. It's stupidly hot outside, but my arms are covered in goosebumps. And as I look at the screen, it feels like someone else is looking at it with me. Not behind me, not in front of me, right over my shoulder. So if, after hearing this, you suddenly feel a chill or get the sense that someone is standing just out of sight, don't worry too much. He's probably just saying hello to you too. So, let me take you back for a minute. There's this park in Western Australia, right on the edge of the city. Back then, it was the sort of place people drifted to after clubbing, or when the night was too hot and sticky to bear inside. Some folks went there to cruise, some to talk, some just to breathe and come down. If you know, you know. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about. For me, that park was like a second bedroom. Sometimes I'd be there with friends, sitting around under the big old trees, sharing cigarettes and stories. Other times, I'd wander off on my own and sit by one of the two lakes, watching the turtles and the frogs, or whatever else decided to show up. It was unofficially social, you know? You never quite knew who you'd bump into along the paths or by the water. This particular night, though, I was alone. It was the late 80s, edging into the early 90s, a strange in-between time. A lot of us were playing with different spiritual paths, Wicca, earth magic, tarot cards that smelled like incense, crystals warmed from being worn inside shirts. We were young and so sure the world was still opening, that magic meant anything was possible. I was about 22 then, still carrying that naive kind of bravery. So that night, I'd just gotten up off the grass near the lake and started walking up one of my favorite paths. I'd walked that path so many times, I could have told you every dip in the ground, every low branch, every tree root that tried to catch your toes. But that night was different. There was this fog, a low, knee-high fog I'd never seen there before. It blanketed everything, the grass, the water, the paths, like the park had slipped into a dream. The trees along the path were subtropical and a bit wild. Paper barks, pink peppercorn vines, and those massive Morton Bay figs, their roots twisting out of the earth like old bones. Some of the roots were big enough that, if you were tired or a bit out of it, you could curl up and sleep inside them. The air was hot and completely still, no breeze at all. The trees rose up out of this flat sheet of mist, like they were growing from a cloud instead of from soil. And the fog, this is the part that really stuck with me. It stopped sharply at the edges of the park. It didn't spill onto the sidewalks or the streets. It just ended, right where the city lights began, like someone had drawn a line. There was a weird silence, too. Not total silence, but sort of hushed. Every now and then I'd pass a frog or see a turtle near the path, just sitting there, not moving, like even the animals were waiting for something to happen. This was my playground, my sanctuary. I knew its quirks, but as I walked up that trail, past each big fig tree, I started to feel like the ground itself was unfamiliar. The twisted roots, the humps and hollows of earth, they felt alive somehow. I kept catching movement in the corner of my eye, and I couldn't tell if it was the mist stirring or the actual trees shifting just outside my direct vision. And I kept telling myself, don't be ridiculous. Trees don't move. You're just spooking yourself. I almost forgot to mention the moon. That night, it was a waxy new moon, but bright, sharp. Moonlight lit the whole park, the lakes, the trees, that strange low fog. It wasn't dark at all. It was washed in silver. About halfway up the trail, I stopped. I hadn't meant to. My body just paused. I blinked and squinted, leaning forward a little as I noticed something between the roots of one of the bigger fig trees. There was a shape lying there, tucked into the space between two massive roots. But as I walked a little closer, my certainty started to fall apart. The shape was too human. It had a head, shoulders, a torso, clearly a body. But something was wrong with the proportions, or the way it was connected to the ground. It was like a puzzle I couldn't quite solve. I suddenly thought, what if it's someone hurt? What if he's passed out? What if he's been beaten up? That kind of thing happened there sometimes, by police, by random thugs, by people looking to punish what they didn't understand. So my concern kicked in, but under it, there was this unease, like a quiet alarm. I thought I could see his hands gripping the knotted roots, like he was holding on to something solid. But when I really looked, my eyes couldn't quite find the point where his hands ended and the wood began. It was as if they blurred into each other. Again, I told myself, it's just pareidolia. You're seeing patterns where there aren't any. It's just roots. It's just fog. I got closer. I bent my knees a little, trying to bring my eyes level with him. I wanted what I was seeing to make sense. I needed it to be something ordinary. A drunk guy, a hallucination, anything I could explain later. Then I realized his head was lowered, but turned just slightly, in my direction. That's when he looked up. Our eyes met. For a moment, everything stopped. It was like the whole night held its breath. I felt a flash of surprise, maybe even shock, on both our faces. Funny thing is, the first feeling I had wasn't fear. It was more like, oh, this is real. In that suspended second, I saw him clearly. He was male, or at least, that's the closest word I have. But he wasn't human. His skin, if you can call it that, had this glistening quality. Not wet, not like slime, but like the sheen you sometimes see on leaves when the moon hits them just right. And he wasn't separate from the tree. It was like he and the fig were part of the same living thing. Roots, bark, and being all woven together. His eyes were beautiful, almond-shaped, like a cat's or a lizard's, and a soft yellow, almost golden. They were sharp, but not cruel. His face didn't look monstrous. He looked kind, actually. Kind and very, very sad. For a breath, I felt surprisingly calm, like he was holding me there in this quiet, gentle space. There was no sense of threat, just this deep, ancient sadness looking back at me. And then something primal inside me snapped on. You know that part of you that doesn't care about logic or kindness, that only knows stay or run? That part woke up. I still don't know if it was warning me, or if it just couldn't cope with how far outside the usual this was. All these years later, I still ask myself, should I have stayed? Could I have helped him somehow? Was I meant to do something? Or was I about to walk into real danger and my body knew before my mind did? I'll never know. Because I ran. I broke eye contact, turned, and bolted back down that path, down through the fog, past the silent turtles and the still water, all the way back to the edges of the park, where the mist just stopped and the city lights felt harsh and reassuring. I didn't look back. I wish I had more to tell you. I wish I had some grand message or conversation or proof. But all I have is that moment, those eyes, that glistening tree-twined body, that sadness, and the certainty that he was real. My conclusion, for what it's worth, is this. He was one of the many forms of life sharing this planet with us. Not metaphorically, literally. One of the beings the old stories were talking about long before we filed them under myth and folklore. Somewhere along the line, we started calling all of that just stories. But that night, alone in that foggy park under a bright young moon, I looked into the eyes of something that wasn't supposed to exist, and it looked back at me. Our world is magical. I think the real question isn't whether these beings are still here. It's this. What does it do to us, to our hearts, to our spirits, when we forget them? So, my story with the supernatural really starts the year my grandma from my mom's side passed away. I was in 7th grade then. We flew down to Mexico after not visiting for like 3 or 5 years. It had been a while. We went to this small town near the coast where my mom grew up. I remember walking into my grandma's old house and seeing cousins I barely recognized, uncles, aunts, family friends. All these people who loved her and were helping my mom sort out the house so it could eventually be sold. My grandma, let's call her Abuela Rosa, had just been buried. After the funeral and all the prayers and food and stories, we came back home to the States. And that's when I saw my mom, Luz, break in a way I had never seen before. She cried constantly. I'd come home from school and my dad, Jorge, would be like, "Hey, grab your backpack. We're going to your Tia Elena's for a bit." He didn't want me just sitting there watching my mom sob all afternoon. She was always the strong one, you know? The one who handled everything. Suddenly she was just shattered. And that alone is scary when you're a kid. One afternoon, my mom started going through my grandma's things. Old photos, little knickknacks, jewelry, the rosaries, some shawls that still smelled like her perfume. I remember watching her pull out this one book from the bottom of a box. It was weird looking. The cover was this faded brown, and in the center there was this symbol, an eye inside a pyramid. The whole thing was in Spanish, and my Spanish was pretty basic back then, so I had no idea what it said. My mom stared at it for a long time. Later that night, she told me what it was about. A book on how to communicate with the dead. She said it almost like a confession. She missed her mom so much that when she realized what the book was, she took it as a sign. She told me she was going to try to talk to Abuela Rosa. So she started following the instructions. Most nights looked kind of the same. My mom would light a candle in the living room, sit in front of this little table with the crucifix, and whisper some words from the book. Then she'd go quiet. The first night, nothing happened. Second night, same thing. Silence. Just the sound of the AC humming and the candle flickering. By the third night, a few things in the house had changed. We had put up pictures of all the family members who had passed away on one wall in the living room. My grandpa, Abuelo Ignacio, some great-grandparents, a cousin who died young. And now we'd added a framed photo of my grandma right next to the crucifix. That night, it was around 10 p.m. My mom did her little ritual again. Candle, prayers, quiet. I was in my room, half doing homework, half zoning out, when I heard it. Bang. It wasn't just some tiny creak. It sounded like someone hitting the wall with their fist. Then another. Bang. My dad got up to check. I remember hearing him walk down the hallway, all annoyed, thinking maybe something had just fallen. Then he called my mom over, and the tone of his voice changed. So I went too. My grandma's picture was no longer on the wall. It was on the floor in the middle of the living room, face up, the glass shattered. Not near the wall, not leaning on anything, just there, like it had been flung forward. And all the other framed pictures? Completely untouched. Still, they did what parents do. They tried to rationalize it for my sake. They fixed the frame, put in new glass, and my dad reinforced all the nails in the wall. Hammered them in deeper, made sure everything was solid. My mom decided that, instead of trying to talk to my grandma again, she would try speaking to my grandpa, who had died exactly 2 years before her. I never really understood why she switched, but in her mind, maybe he'd be stronger on the other side or something. That same night, she tries again. Candle, book, whispered prayers. And then, again, this huge bang, then the sound of glass breaking. We ran into the living room, and it was my grandpa's picture this time. His frame was on the floor, glass everywhere, but the nail was still in the wall, perfectly fine. The frame somehow ended up further to the left, closer to my parents' bedroom door, like it had been thrown. My mom was done after that. She closed the book, said, "No mas," and put it in a box in the hallway closet. I could tell she was scared in a different way now, not just sad. And I was starting to feel like something had been invited in and did not want to leave. That's when things got personal. I started hearing my name being called. At first, I thought it was just normal kid stuff. You know, you think you hear your mom call you, but she didn't. I'd be in my room and hear, clear as day, "Oye, ven aquí," in my mom's voice. I'd go to the kitchen, no one. I'd hear my dad's voice calling my name, go to their room, and he'd be knocked out snoring. This kept happening. For a while, I told myself it was just my imagination, or maybe the TV, or neighbors. I didn't want to be the paranoid kid jumping at every sound. But deep down, I knew something was off. Then came the night that really messed me up. My parents had a couples retreat with our church that went from 6 to 11 p.m. It wasn't unusual. They trusted me to be okay for a few hours at home. I was excited, honestly. More time for movies and video games. So I finished watching a superhero movie. Pretty sure it was one of the Spider-Man movies, on DVD in the living room. After it ended, I turned off the TV, switched off the main light, and stayed on the couch with just this small lamp on in the corner. I pulled out my old iPod and started scrolling through videos and memes. That's when I felt it. You know when someone stares at you from across a room and you just know? Your body picks it up before your brain does. I got this sudden chill, like a cold hand on the back of my neck. The air felt heavier, if that makes any sense. I tried to ignore it at first. I pulled my feet up on the couch and wrapped my arms around my knees. The house started making little noises. The fridge, the AC clicking on, normal stuff. But it all sounded too loud. I got nervous enough that I picked up the house phone and called my parents. I told my mom, "Hey, I feel weird. I think someone's in the house." She tried to calm me down, saying it was just my nerves, that they'd be home soon. While she was talking, I looked over toward the kitchen, and the chairs moved. We had these two swivel bar stools at the counter that separates the kitchen from the living room. I watched one of them jerk like someone had kicked it. Then it slid, hard, right into my leg, like it was trying to push me off the couch. The other chair tipped over and hit the floor. The sound was so loud in that quiet house, I almost dropped the phone. My mom's voice faded into the background because at that point I was just frozen. It looked and felt like a scene from a haunted house movie, except I was the one in it. And then I heard it again. My name, called from just to my left. I turned my head, slowly, and that's when I saw her. All the horror movies I'd ever watched hit me at once. I just bolted. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor and cracked. I ran straight to my parents' bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it. I was shaking so hard I had trouble turning the lock. And then the banging started. Someone, something, pounded on the other side of the door. Not polite knocking, full-on, angry hits. I backed up against the far wall, sliding down onto the floor, crying, struggling to breathe. It felt like that moment would never end. Then, suddenly, the noise stopped. The house went quiet again. That silence was almost worse. After what felt like forever, but was probably around 9 or 10 minutes, I heard my parents' car pull up. The front door opened. I heard my mom call my name, this time for real. I cracked the bedroom door open and ran to them. The house was a mess. The chairs knocked over, the broken phone on the floor, the bar stool shoved away from the counter. They didn't see anybody else, of course. Just their kid, shaking, hyperventilating, crying like my life had just been ripped open. After that night, the weirdness didn't stop right away. It kind of moved into my dreams. I started having nightmares, really vivid ones, where I was in this gray forest, like everything was covered in fog. And there were other versions of me in there. They'd chase me, corner me, and do horrible things. I won't go into detail, but I'd wake up feeling dirty, terrified, and exhausted, like my soul had been chewed up. When my uncle, Tio Mateo, heard what had been going on, he got involved. In our culture, he's known as a kind of curandero, a healer. He came over with herbs, holy water, candles, and eggs. He had all of us stand still while he prayed and rubbed the eggs over our bodies, one by one. Then he cracked them into glasses of water. I remember seeing the yolks twist and darken in these strange shapes. Some parts looked almost black, with weird little strings in them. He shook his head like, yeah, something's not right here. Our priest from church also came by to bless the house. He walked room to room, sprinkling holy water on the walls, the doorways, the photos. He prayed over the living room, especially near that wall with all the pictures. Slowly, things calmed down. No more voices calling my name. No more banging on the walls. The nightmares faded. The house felt like a home again and not whatever it had become. Years later, I was a lot older. This was around 2017. I was cleaning out a closet, and guess what I found? That book. Same faded cover, same eye inside the pyramid. The moment I saw it, all those memories hit me like a wave. The broken frames, the chairs moving, that thing wearing my grandma's face. I didn't even open it. I took it outside that weekend when some friends and I had a bonfire, and I used it as kindling. Watched it catch and curl up into ash. It was strangely satisfying, like I was closing a door that should have never been opened. And the truth is, even after all these years, about 14 of them now, I still don't know what that spirit was. Was it something my mom accidentally invited in with that book? Was it just grief twisting reality around us? Was it something that latched onto my family for a while? I don't have answers. All I know is, it felt real. It left a mark. And every time I hear a random knock in a quiet house, a tiny part of me is back in that living room, looking at a broken picture frame on the floor, wondering who or what threw it. I've just started seeing this guy, right? Let's call him Noah. We're a few dates in, still in that getting to really know each other phase. One night we're at his place, just curled up on his tiny, squeaky couch, talking about absolutely nothing important. Work, bad movies, what we'd eat if calories didn't exist forever. And then his phone, which is just sitting on the coffee table, suddenly slides a few inches across the surface. Like, no vibration, no notification, nothing. We both watch it move. I kind of laugh and go, did you see that? And without missing a beat, he sighs and says, yeah, my apartment does stuff like that all the time. I'm pretty sure it's haunted. Now I'm wide awake. He starts telling me about weird things that have been happening. Lights flickering, doors creaking open on their own, hearing footsteps when he's home alone. You know how it is. One spooky thing leads to another, and suddenly we're trading ghost stories instead of flirting. Then he goes, okay, actually, I've got one for you. The creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. And I can see his face change. He's still Noah, still relaxed, but there's this seriousness in his eyes like he's about to pull up a memory he really doesn't visit often. This was back when I was in high school, he says. His parents had gone out of town for the weekend, so he'd basically had the house to himself. He'd invited his friend Marco over, and they were doing what bored teenage boys do, playing video games, drinking cheap beer they definitely weren't supposed to have, talking trash, staying up too late. Eventually, Marco went home, and the house got really quiet. A little while later, Noah's high school girlfriend, Lena, called the house phone, which already dates the story, right? She sounded upset and told him, we need to talk. I'm coming over. So he's just sitting there on the couch in the living room, TV on low, waiting for her to show up. After a few minutes, there's a knock at the front door. He gets up, walks over, opens it, and there's no one there. The porch is empty. The street is completely still. No car pulling away, no footsteps, just silence. He stands there for a second, confused, and then kind of shrugs it off. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe the old door just sounded like a knock. He closes the door, locks it, and goes back to the couch. He's about to sit down when, out of the corner of his eye, he sees something move. Just a shadow at first. You know that feeling when your brain hasn't caught up yet, but your body knows something's wrong? So he turns his head. And there, standing a few feet in front of the couch, is a man. A full-grown man. Not blurry, not see-through, just there. The man is wearing a black suit and a crisp white shirt with a dark tie. His hair is slicked back, neat, almost old-fashioned, and he's just smiling. Not a friendly smile, not a big, creepy grin, just this small, fixed smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Noah tells me he froze. He didn't scream, didn't run. He just stared at this man who had absolutely no business being in his living room. The air felt heavy, he said. The way he described it, it was like the room had suddenly gotten thicker, like sound would have to push through the air to get out. He's locked eyes with this stranger, and it feels like forever, like they're both just standing there, Noah on the edge of the couch and this man in the suit, staring. Then, there's another knock at the door. A sharp, loud, very real knock. He doesn't see him leave. He doesn't hear anything. He's just gone. Noah stumbles to the front door, yanks it open, and this time it's Lena, standing there on the porch, arms crossed, looking annoyed and nervous. He drags her inside and starts telling her everything, talking way too fast. The empty doorway, the man in the suit, the way it felt wrong. She listens, but she kind of rolls her eyes and chalks it up to him being drunk and alone and spooked in a big, empty house. She doesn't believe him. Life goes on. He doesn't tell a lot of people about it, but the image of that man in the suit, just standing there, smiling, stays burned into his mind. Fast forward a bit. One afternoon, he's visiting his grandmother, his abuela, over at her little house. She mostly speaks Spanish, and his Spanish isn't great, but they manage. They're sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, when he suddenly remembers that night and decides to tell her about it. He starts describing what happened, stumbling over words in Spanish. He tells her that he was alone, that someone knocked, that no one was there, that a man in a suit appeared in his living room. He doesn't even get to the part about the smile before her face changes. She sets her cup down, looks at him very seriously, and says, in Spanish, "Es el diablo. Es el diablo." That's the devil. That's the devil. He's startled and asks her what she means, and that's when she tells him her own story. Back when she was young, living in a small town in northern Mexico, she and her friends used to go out dancing at this popular nightclub on the edge of town. It had a name like El Paraíso, Paradise, one of those places with colored lights and music spilling out into the street. One night, she and two of her girlfriends went there like usual. The place was crowded, music was loud, everyone was drinking and laughing and dancing. While they were at the bar, this incredibly handsome man approached them. She remembers this very clearly. He was wearing a dark suit, not flashy, just sharp, fitted, like he'd stepped straight out of a movie. He was charming, well-spoken, confident. He bought them drinks, made them laugh, the whole cliché. One of her friends, Rosa, was instantly taken with him. You know when you can tell when someone's already decided, yeah, I like this one? It was like that. But the other friend, Camila, got quiet. She leaned over to Noah's grandmother and whispered, "Something's wrong. Don't look at his face. Look at his legs." Now that's not a normal sentence you hear every day. So his grandmother, curious and a little unnerved, glances down. And that's when she sees it. The man is wearing perfectly normal dress pants, but the outline underneath isn't right. She said that one leg looked thin and bony, like a bird's, like a scrawny chicken leg. The other leg had this strange curve to it, like the hind leg of an animal, bent in a way a human leg shouldn't be. Almost like a goat's leg. She can feel her skin crawling even as she's telling the story to Noah, decades later. Panicking, she nudges Camila and mutters that they should go to the bathroom, come up with an excuse to leave, something. Rosa, meanwhile, is still completely charmed, laughing at this man's jokes, leaning closer to him at the bar. So his grandmother and Camila tell Rosa, "We'll be right back." And they leave her there with him while they rush to the bathroom, hearts pounding. And then, in the middle of their whispered panic, they hear it. Screaming. Not the fun kind of screaming you hear in a club when a favorite song comes on. Real, blood-chilling screaming. People shouting, chairs scraping, glass breaking. They yank the bathroom door open. The club is chaos. People are shoving past each other, trying to get out. There's smoke. Someone yells that there's a fire. They can see flames starting to crawl up the curtains near the stage, then licking across the ceiling. Everything is moving too fast. The music has stopped, but the ringing in their ears is so loud that it feels like it's still playing. His grandmother and Camilla are pushed outside with the crowd, coughing, eyes burning. They stumble into the street, disoriented, and when they finally catch their breath, they realize something. They can't find Rosa. They search the crowd. They call her name. No one's seen her. No one remembers the man in the suit clearly enough to describe him. Some people don't even remember noticing him at all. The fire department comes. The club burns hard and fast. By morning, it's mostly a charred shell. And Rosa, the friend who'd stayed at the bar with the handsome stranger in the suit, is never seen again. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever. No body is found that they can identify as hers. No one hears from her. She just disappears. His grandmother tells Noah that for years afterward, people in that town whispered about it. Some said the fire was just an accident. Some said it was something darker. More than a few said the same thing. The man in the suit was the devil, walking around in plain sight. So when Noah told her about his man in the suit, smiling at him in his empty house, she didn't hesitate. "Es el diablo," she said. "He likes to show himself, just enough so you remember." Noah finishes telling me all this, sitting beside me on that same squeaky couch where his phone had just slid across the table on its own. And we're both quiet for a moment. The room feels different. The shadows feel a little heavier in the corners. I can hear the refrigerator humming, the pipes in the wall ticking, every tiny house noise suddenly amplified. He gives a small, nervous laugh and says, "So, yeah, that's why I don't love being here alone at night." I just look at him and say, "Okay, well, if your house is haunted, your ghosts are way too dramatic." But I'll be honest with you, ever since he told me that story, anytime I catch a glimpse of someone in the corner of my eye, like a reflection in a dark window or a shape at the end of a hallway, I always check what they're wearing. And if I ever see a man in a suit just standing there, smiling for no reason, I'm not sticking around to find out who he is. So, let me tell you about the one night that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. A couple of years ago, I worked at this haunted attraction in rural Delaware called Nightfall Acres. I was there for a season, working on the hayride, specifically the clown tent scene. It was either 2020 or 2021, one of those foggy years where everything kind of blends together. During the rush, it was chaos. Screaming guests, chainsaws, laughter, the whole thing. But in between hayrides, we'd get these short breaks. On the side of the tent, there was this little area where I could stash my jacket, my cigarettes, a bottle of water, and just sit for a minute. You know, catch my breath, scroll my phone, decompress. Right across from that little rest spot was a wide stretch of trees. There was this narrow dirt path, or maybe a golf cart trail running in front of the woods. From where I sat, I had a clear view of that path. One night, October 23rd, I'm pretty sure. It was late, maybe around 10:30 or 11 p.m. The moon was really bright, brighter than usual, like someone had turned up the contrast on the whole scene. The woods across from me were surprisingly well lit for how late it was. I was sitting there, smoking, looking down at my phone. Just another break between hay rides. Then, for no particular reason, I looked up. And that's when I saw it. Something huge and completely white was walking along the trail in front of the trees. At first, my brain didn't know what to do with it. It was on 4 legs, but it didn't move like a normal animal. At the shoulders, it had to be 8 or 9 feet tall. It had this strange, almost gliding gait, like each step was too smooth, too controlled, but still somehow wrong. The closest thing I can compare it to are those spirit walker costumes that were floating around online for a while, with the tall, stilted legs. Except this didn't look like a costume. It didn't bounce or wobble. It just flowed. I froze, completely. I've been startled plenty of times at haunted attractions, actors jumping out, props falling, all that. But this was different. This was the kind of fear that makes your body go silent inside. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I just watched. The way it looked was even stranger. Its body seemed to shift as it walked. Sometimes it looked sharp and angular, almost polygonal, like something out of an early video game. Then it would seem softer, the edges blurring, like it was losing shape and then pulling itself back together. It was moving slowly, maybe 2 or 3 miles an hour, just strolling down the trail like it had all the time in the world. I watched it for what felt like forever. In reality, it was probably a minute, maybe a minute and a half. Long enough to really see it. Long enough that I can still replay it in my head, frame by frame. Every so often, it would turn and look in my direction. When it did, I realized it had no face. No eyes, no mouth, nothing. Just a smooth, blank surface where something's features should have been. And every time it looked at me, even without eyes, I felt this wave of anxiety crash over me, like my body was screaming at me to run, but I just couldn't. Eventually, it kept walking and slipped out of my line of sight behind some trees. The second it disappeared, it was like my body came back online. I jumped up and bolted to the other side of the clown tent, where a couple of my coworkers were hanging out. People like Mia and Tyler, who'd been there longer than me. I was out of breath, trying to explain what I'd just seen. I remember my voice shaking, my hands still buzzing with adrenaline. They listened, and I could tell they were unsettled, but I don't know if they fully believed me. I mean, I get it. We work at a haunted attraction, right? Costumes and weird props are kind of the whole point. Even I tried to talk myself out of it. I kept thinking, okay, maybe it was just someone in some crazy costume I hadn't seen yet. Maybe it was part of a new bit or a test scare on the trail. But here's the thing. There was nothing out in that direction. No set, no scare zone. No reason for someone to be walking that far out, especially in full costume, on a muddy trail, in the dark, with no audience. At the end of the night, I went straight to my manager. Let's call him Rick, who also owned the place. I asked him if we had any costumes that looked like a tall, all-white, faceless creature. I tried to describe the movement, the height, the way it looked under the moonlight. He just shook his head and said, "No, nothing like that. Not even close." Over the next few days, I told a few people who'd worked there for years about what I'd seen. A couple of them got really quiet and then admitted they'd seen something similar in that same general area. This weird, white, too tall thing that didn't move like a person. Hearing that didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made it worse. To this day, that image is burned into my memory. That enormous, matte white shape moving down the trail, shifting and faceless, looking my way without eyes. Even talking about it now makes me uncomfortable. There's this part of me that's genuinely afraid I might see it again someday, like I somehow ended up on its radar. And I really, truly hope I never do. I've scared a lot of people on purpose working those haunted attractions. But that night, I was the one who got haunted. So, my dad's side of the family has always been very spiritual, but not religious at all. You know the type. Crystals on the windowsill, dreams that mean something, that whole vibe. A lot of them have their own ghost stories or moments with the beyond. I've always been pretty skeptical, but there's this itch in the back of my mind that never totally goes away. So I figured, why not tell you? My great-grandma, her name was Elena, was a survivor of World War II. She fled her home in Lithuania when everything started falling apart. I don't know all the details. My parents were really tight-lipped about that part of the family history, and honestly, pretty fiercely conservative and closed off about anything that made them emotional. So all I really have are fragments. Elena's son, my grandfather Jonas, ended up marrying my grandma, Marion. Now, my grandma is a character. She claims she has Native American heritage, but she also tells these wild, dramatic stories that always made me kind of squint and go, really though? One of those stories used to haunt my dreams as a kid. She'd talk about this old farmhouse she lived in for a while. According to her, one night she was there completely alone, just her and the dogs. She said she was lying in bed, drifting off, when she felt this very clear tap on her hip. Not like a cramp, not the blanket shifting, an actual tap, like a fingertip. In my head, I always pictured her on a top bunk bed for some reason, even though she never said that. I think it's because I slept on the top bunk above my little brother for years, so I would imagine her in my place, someone or something underneath. She'd tell the story with such intensity. Her voice would drop, her eyes would get big, and by the time she got to the moment where she froze in bed and didn't dare turn around, my brother and I would be staring at each other, mouths open, completely hooked. We didn't realize that being breathless and spooked was exactly the reaction she was aiming for. Later on, I had my own, let's call it a maybe paranormal moment. We lived for a while in this housing development that everyone said was built near old indigenous burial grounds. You know how cities like to lean into creepy local legends if there's money in it? Ours definitely did. There were plaques, little historical tour blurbs, the whole thing. One afternoon, I was going up the stairs to my Aunt Denise's place. Halfway up, I froze. At the top of the stairs, just standing there, I saw this little native girl. She was holding a small doll in one arm, and she was looking right at me. Not angry, not smiling, just focused. There was this feeling, like she was trying to warn me about something. I wish I could tell you exactly what it was, but the message is just gone. All I remember is the fear, and not a fun campfire story fear either. It went straight into my bones. Now, I was a kid who loved mysteries and weirdness, but this shook me enough that I actually told the adults. And they didn't laugh. They went quiet. They listened. They nodded. They told me my older cousin Aaron had seen the same girl on those stairs years before. Same age, same doll, same staircase. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. Instantly it became real for me. Capital R, real. From there, I dove headfirst into everything paranormal. Ghost shows, creepy books, urban legends. I was all in. I questioned everything, but in a way that was excited, not skeptical. I wanted the world to be full of hidden doors and secret messages. I'm older, a little more grounded, and one day, the truth kind of slips out. The same people who had encouraged my paranormal obsession, the ones who told me, "It's all real, you're so sensitive, you can see things other people can't." Yeah, turns out a lot of it was a joke to them. They admitted, laughing, that they had played along because I believed so hard, that it was hilarious how seriously I took it, and that some of the stories I'd been told, and even the confirmations of my own experiences, were just them messing with me. "Come on, it's funny, right?" they said. I didn't think it was funny. And the thing is, not everything came from them. Some things I experienced on my own. Like my dad's brother, my Uncle Marco. He told me a story that my dad still swears is true. When they were younger, they were driving back late at night to the old family place, this creaky farmhouse out in the country. As they pulled up, they looked toward the kitchen window and saw their grandmother, my Grandma Lydia on their mom's side, at the sink. They said she was washing dishes exactly the way she always did, one dish at a time, scrubbing with a little scouring pad, then holding it up to the light to check for a shine. They watched her do this for a few seconds from the car. But here's the thing. She had died months before. They rushed inside, calling out to her, flipping on lights, checking the kitchen, the hallway, the bedrooms. Nothing. House completely empty. They still tell that story like it's just a simple fact. Like, yeah, that happened. End of discussion. And then there's my own weirdness that didn't involve anyone else at all. Once, when I was a teenager, my friends and I decided to go explore this road that everyone in town said was spiritually active. It used to be a main road, but it had fallen into disrepair, and people mostly avoided it. Of course, we heard that and went, "Perfect, let's go at night." We walked that cracked, overgrown road under the stars, taking pictures with our cheap little cameras and phones. There was this heavy feeling in the air, like the silence was pressing in on us. And I remember telling them, "I don't know what it is, but something is walking with us." Later, when we looked at the photos, we noticed something strange. In almost every picture that I was in, there was this bright orb of light hovering near me. Not dust, not a lens flare that showed up in every shot. Only the photos where I was standing there, a little blob of light right beside me or just over my shoulder. Pictures without me, no orb. It was like something had decided to be my +1 on that midnight walk. And then there's the part I still don't really know how to talk about without feeling a little ridiculous. People close to me tell me I predict things. Like I'll say, "I bet so-and-so is going to call in the next hour," and then they do. Or I'll dream about something oddly specific, and then it plays out in real life a few days later. Or I'll know something about a situation that no one has told me, but I'll just say it, and it's right. For most of my life, I wrote it off as instinct, or pattern recognition, or just being really observant. You can explain a lot with those things, honestly. But lately, it's gotten harder to completely deny that there might be something else going on. Some other sense, just barely humming under the surface. So here I am, skeptical, a little bit bruised from being the butt of the joke, but still carrying these stories around with me. I don't know if that girl on the stairs was real, or if my brain stitched something together from fear and local legends. I don't know if my grandma really felt that tap on her hip, or if my uncles truly saw their dead grandmother at the sink. What I do know is how real it all felt. To them, to me, to the kid who just wanted adults to take them seriously, and to the adult who still feels something tug at the edge of her awareness now and then. Maybe it's all stories. Maybe it's all neurons firing in weird patterns. Or maybe, just maybe, there's a little more light on the staircase than we're willing to admit. So, this happened about 4 months ago, around 7 p.m. At the time, I was staying with my older cousin and his family, helping out at his little electronics shop during a long break from university. Most evenings I'd walk home, and instead of taking the short, busy road, I'd deliberately choose the long, winding one. Not for the scenery, for privacy. That's the route I use when I want to smoke without my cousin's wife finding out. It's usually quiet, just a few scattered houses, some overgrown bushes, and the occasional motorbike passing by. The kind of road where you can hear your own footsteps and your own thoughts a little too clearly. That evening, I passed my friend Musa, who runs this tiny juice stand along the way. We just did a quick greeting, one of those, "You good?" nods. Nothing strange, nothing heavy. The sky was already dimming, that soft blue-gray right before it turns properly dark. You know that time of day when the streetlights are thinking about turning on, but haven't yet? I kept walking. Now, normally, if I see someone coming toward me, I'll wait before lighting up. I really don't want anyone recognizing me, and then somehow that story traveling all the way back home. But that day, there were 2 people on the road. One guy was in front of me, walking in the same direction as I was. He had a dark blue jacket on and was moving at a slow, steady pace. The other person was coming toward us from the opposite side, walking down the road. That one was easy to spot in the fading light. He was wearing this light gray hoodie. Not pure white, but still bright enough to stand out. I slowed my pace, looked around. It was just us 3 on this long, quiet stretch of road. No cars passing, no bikes. Just that faint rustling from the bushes and the sound of my steps on the dirt. I figured, all right, it's fine, and decided to light my cigarette. So I glanced down, cupping my hand around the lighter because of the little evening breeze. The flame flickers, catches, and I take a quick drag. This all takes, 2 seconds? 3? When I look up, the guy in the gray hoodie is gone. Just gone. He hadn't passed me yet. He hadn't brushed by. I didn't hear footsteps running or leaves moving or anything. 1 second he's there, clear as day, walking toward us. The next second, nothing. Empty road. The guy in front of me, the one in the dark jacket, had just been about to pass him. I saw his reaction. His body kind of jerked, like he'd just hit an invisible wall. He turned his head sharply to where the man should have been, like his brain was trying to catch up with what his eyes had just seen. And I could tell, he had definitely seen him. And he had definitely seen him disappear. There wasn't even a pause after that. He just ran. I mean, full-on sprint. He bolted downhill toward the main road like something had exploded behind him. No looking back, no trying to be subtle. You could see pure fear in the way he moved, like his legs were deciding faster than his mind could. Meanwhile, I'm standing there with a cigarette in my hand, my heart suddenly pounding. My first thought was, do I really want to keep walking in that direction? But you know how it is. I tried to act like I wasn't scared. I told myself, maybe I missed something. Maybe he stepped off the road. Maybe there's a side path I never noticed. I didn't want this to turn into some horror movie in my head, so I kept walking. When I reached the spot where the man in the gray hoodie should have been, I slowed down and actually stopped. I checked the bushes on both sides of the road. I looked behind a little concrete barrier on the edge. I even peered into this small ditch where people sometimes throw trash. Nothing, just a strange, heavy kind of silence. I stood there longer than I probably should have, just listening. My cigarette had burned almost halfway down between my fingers, and I hadn't even taken another drag. I remember thinking, if this was a prank, it's a really committed one. There was nowhere for him to go that quickly. The road stretches out in a fairly straight line there. If he'd run, I would have seen him. If he'd ducked into a yard, I would have at least heard something. But there was nothing. Just that empty road and my racing heartbeat. I really wish I could talk to the guy who ran. I still think about him sometimes. Like, did he see exactly what I saw? Did he see more? Did he see something in that split second that I didn't catch because I was looking down at my lighter? But I never saw him again. I don't even know his name. Just some stranger who was there for the weirdest moment of my life and then disappeared from it. Same as the man in the gray hoodie. That night, when I got back to my cousin's place, I was quiet. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I just showered, ate, and pretended everything was normal. But inside, I was still back on that road. For a while after that, I avoided that route. I'd take the busier road home, even if it meant no sneaky cigarettes. Every time I thought about going back, I'd picture that empty stretch of road and the way that guy took off running like he'd seen the edge of the world. Eventually, though, I did go back. Life kind of forced me to. Habits, shortcuts, routines, and nothing else happened. No strange figures, no disappearances. Just the same quiet road, the same fading light, the same long walk home. But that memory, it never really softened. It just stayed sharp. And look, I've asked myself all the usual questions. Was it the light playing tricks on my eyes? Did he just step behind something at the perfect moment? Did my brain just fill in the gaps wrong? Thing is, it wasn't just me. That other guy saw him too. I saw the shock in his body language. I saw the fear in the way he ran. Whatever happened on that road, I'm convinced it wasn't just in my head. So yeah, that's the night I watched someone simply not be there anymore. I still don't know what I saw, but I know what I felt. What about you? If you were in my place, would you say it was a trick of the mind, or would you think something else was walking that road with us?